When I tell people about what happened in that attic, they usually look at me like I've lost my mind. I can see the doubt in their eyes, the nervous smiles. They think I'm making it up, that it was a dream, a hallucination, or just the product of a very overactive imagination. But I lived it. I felt it. And even now, years later, when the rain hits my window just right, or the house creaks in the dead of night, I can still hear the echo, not of the rain or the wind, but of something else. Something that shouldn't have been there, waiting. And sometimes, when I'm truly alone, I still feel its gaze, a cold, possessive stare, right through the floorboards, as if it never truly left. This isn't just a story about a haunted house. It's about a part of me that was touched and forever changed by something that found its way inside. It's about the echo in the attic that found its way into my soul. I was 19 when I inherited my great-aunt Eleanor's house. It was an old Victorian, tucked away on the outskirts of a small, forgotten town in New Hampshire. My aunt had been a peculiar woman, a recluse, known for her eccentricities and a rumored collection of oddities. I'd only met her a handful of times at family gatherings when I was very young, and I mostly remembered her as a stern-faced woman with eyes that seemed to see right through you. Her house, I imagined, would be just as peculiar. Truth be told, I needed a place to stay. My college campus was expensive, and a quiet, rent-free Victorian sounded like a dream. My parents, practical as ever, saw it as an opportunity for me to learn responsibility and get away from distractions. Little did they know the kind of distraction that house held. The first few days were a blur of unpacking and exploring. The house was enormous, full of dusty furniture draped in white sheets, forgotten relics, and a pervasive smell of old wood and something vaguely floral, like dried potpourri that had long lost its scent. The electricity was spotty, the plumbing groaned, but it had character, and it had an attic. The attic door was at the end of the second-floor hallway, a dark wooden panel set flush into the ceiling, accessible only by a pull-down string ladder. It was always closed, always seemed colder than the rest of the house, and always gave me a slight shiver whenever I glanced at it. For the first week, I avoided it. There was enough to do in the main living areas, and the thought of disturbing decades of dust and whatever else my aunt had hoarded up there wasn't appealing. Then came the rain, a relentless, biblical downpour that lasted for days, trapping me inside. The house groaned and sighed with the wind, and the rain hammered against the old windows, a constant, drumming rhythm that began to grate on my nerves. It was during this storm, one particularly dark afternoon, that I heard it. A faint tap, tap, tap coming from directly above me. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth, a bowl of instant ramen growing cold. The tapping wasn't random. It was rhythmic, persistent, almost insistent. Top, top, top. Pausa. Top, top, top. My first thought was a branch hitting the roof, but the sound seemed to resonate from within the house, directly from the attic. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding absurdly small in the cavernous living room. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, filled only with the relentless drumming of the rain. I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling, or perhaps a mischievous mouse. The next day, the tapping started again. This time, it was louder, more deliberate. It lasted for a few minutes, then ceased. The following morning, I heard what sounded suspiciously like quiet, shuffling footsteps directly above my bedroom ceiling. That's when my curiosity, mingled with a growing unease, finally won out. I grabbed a flashlight, braced myself, and pulled down the attic ladder. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight as I ascended, the old wooden rungs groaning under my weight. The air in the attic was thick, stagnant, and cold, despite the warm summer storm outside. The scent of old wood was stronger here, mixed with something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. My imagination, I told myself. The attic was a labyrinth of shadows and forgotten relics, stacked boxes, broken furniture, cobweb-draped mannequins, and piles of yellowed newspapers. As I moved deeper, my flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing shelves lined with dusty books, odd ceramic figurines, and a collection of antique dolls with glassy, staring eyes. I spent an hour up there, finding nothing to explain the sounds. No broken window, no loose beam, just silence and the occasional drip of rain that had somehow found its way through a tiny crack in the roof. I tried to dismiss it all as paranoia, the product of living alone in an old house during a storm. But the sounds continued, the rhythmic tapping, the soft shuffling, and then, one night, a low, almost guttural whisper. It was indistinct, like someone talking through a thick blanket, but it was there, just above my bed. I started sleeping in the living room, trying to escape the auditory assault from the ceiling. One evening, while reading in the living room, a chill snaked up my spine. The air grew heavy, and the floral metallic scent from the attic filled the room. The rain outside intensified, drumming violently against the windows. Then, I felt it. A pressure, a presence. It was standing behind me. I was sure of it. I couldn't move. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The air around me grew frigid, and I felt a faint, cold breath on my neck. A voice, not a whisper this time, but a raspy, ancient voice, resonated not in my ears, but directly inside my head. "You are alone," it rasped. I finally managed to leap up, spinning around, my eyes wide. There was nothing there. Just the empty room, the rain lashing against the windows, and the terrifying knowledge that I was not, in fact, alone. That night, I called my parents, rambling incoherently about noises, presences, and voices. They, of course, thought I was cracking under the pressure of college and solo living. My mom suggested I get some rest. My dad told me to man up. I knew what I had to do. I had to face whatever was in that attic. The next day, armed with the crucifix my grandmother had given me years ago, and a newfound desperate courage, I went back upstairs. The attic felt heavier, colder, almost watchful. I climbed the ladder, flashlight clutched tight. This time, I noticed something I hadn't before. Hidden behind a stack of antique hat boxes was a small, intricately carved wooden chest. It was dark, almost black, with strange, swirling symbols etched into its surface. An uneasy feeling washed over me. This felt significant. This felt wrong. As my fingers grazed the lid, a jolt of ice shot through me. The tapping started again, right beside my ear, faster, more furious. The air grew thick, the temperature plummeted, and the metallic floral scent became overwhelming, almost sickening. I felt the pressure, the presence, rising around me, suffocating me. Then the whispers started, not just one, but many, a cacophony of ancient guttural sounds swirling around me, trying to force their way into my mind. I could almost hear words forming, overlapping, chanting a name I didn't recognize, yet felt deeply disturbing. I slammed the lid of the chest shut, but it was too late. As I did, a sharp, piercing pain erupted in my head, like an ice pick driving into my skull. I cried out, dropping the flashlight, plunging the attic into near darkness, illuminated only by the faint light filtering through the storm clouds outside. I scrambled backwards, away from the chest, tripping over something unseen. As I fell, I heard a new sound, a low, distorted laugh emanating from everywhere and nowhere. And then, a voice, clearer this time, not in my head, but echoing from the very walls of the attic. "I am here, and now, you are too." I don't remember much after that, just a blur of panicked scrambling, falling down the ladder and then collapsing on the hallway floor, shaking uncontrollably. The house was silent again, save for the rain, but something had changed. In the days that followed, the physical manifestations faded. No more tapping, no more shuffling. But the presence remained. It wasn't just in the house anymore. It felt like it was with me. A constant, cold awareness at the edge of my perception. I started having vivid, disturbing dreams that weren't my own. Fragmented images of an old, dark ritual, of sacrifice, and a hunger that was ancient and insatiable. My personality began to shift. I became withdrawn, irritable, and prone to sudden, inexplicable bursts of anger. My eyes felt heavy, my energy constantly drained. I'd catch myself staring blankly at walls for minutes, an unsettling emptiness inside. I stopped showering, stopped eating properly. My hygiene suffered. My grades plummeted. One morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were sunken, dark circles beneath them, but there was something else. A flicker in their depths, a coldness, a malevolence that wasn't mine. And for a brief, horrifying second, my lips curved into a slow, unsettling smile, a smile that was utterly alien. It was the same expression I had imagined on my great-aunt Eleanor's face in my distorted memories. That was the moment I truly understood. It wasn't just an echo in the attic. It was an entity, and it had found a new host. It was possessing me, slowly, subtly, intertwining its being with mine. I wasn't entirely myself anymore. There were moments when I felt completely detached, watching my own body move and speak, as if from a distance. The whispers were no longer just sounds. They were thoughts, insidious suggestions, urging me towards dark impulses. I knew I needed help, but who would believe me? My parents already thought I was losing it. I couldn't tell them I was being possessed by something from my great-aunt's attic. Driven by an instinct I didn't recognize as my own, I found myself drawn back to the attic. The wooden chest. I had to get rid of it. But when I tried to touch it, my hand recoiled as if burned. A voice, familiar and terrifying, resonated inside my mind. Mine. I started researching. Old folklore, demonology, accounts of possessions. I stumbled upon ancient texts describing attachment entities, spirits that linger, drawn to objects or places, and eventually to vulnerable individuals. The symbols on the chest, I discovered, were consistent with a specific, obscure cult that practiced blood rituals to summon entities of profound malevolence. My great-aunt Eleanor, the recluse, the eccentric. Had she been involved in something truly sinister? Had this chest been a conduit, a prison, or perhaps even an offering? The entity grew stronger. It began to manifest physically, through me. Objects would move when I was alone. Doors would slam, and the air around me would drop to freezing temperatures. My own voice would occasionally crack, replaced by a lower, raspier tone that didn't belong to me. My family and friends noticed, attributing it to stress or depression. I couldn't explain. One night, the storm raged again. Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the house. The rain was a deafening roar. I was alone, sitting in the living room, feeling the entity's presence pulse through me, stronger than ever. It was trying to take full control. I fought it, a silent, desperate battle within my own mind, but its will was overwhelming. I felt my hands rise, seemingly on their own, and reach for a heavy glass vase on the mantelpiece. The intent, I realized with horror, was to smash it against my own head. In that moment of absolute terror, a flicker of my true self broke through. I remembered the crucifix, my grandmother's crucifix. I tore it from my neck, where I always wore it, and, with a surge of desperate strength, slammed it onto the wooden chest in the attic. The house erupted. A shriek, piercing and unearthly, tore through the rain and thunder. The wooden chest vibrated violently, the symbols on its surface glowing with a faint, malevolent red light. The attic door, which I had left open, slammed shut with such force that it splintered. I heard a sound like something massive thrashing around upstairs, throwing furniture, tearing at the walls. The very foundations of the old house seemed to tremble. I fled. I ran out into the pouring rain, barefoot, not caring about anything but putting distance between myself and that house, that thing. I ran until my lungs burned, until I collapsed on the side of the road, soaked and gasping, the thunder still echoing in my ears, but the internal screams finally quieting. I never went back to that house. My parents eventually sold it, barely making a profit, putting my illness down to mental health issues that needed professional help. I did seek help, extensive therapy, and I never told them the full truth. The strange smile in the mirror eventually faded. The dreams lessened. The inexplicable anger subsided. But sometimes, when the rain falls hard and the house settles in the dead of night, I feel a ghost of that cold presence, a phantom touch on my neck, a fleeting thought that isn't my own, a metallic scent in the air. I can still hear the echo, not of the rain or the wind, but of something that was in that attic and for a terrifying, life-altering period was also within me. And I know, deep down, it's still out there, waiting for another host, another place to call its own. This happened when I was around 11, and my sister Lily was 8. We lived in a house on the edge of a vast, dense forest in rural Oregon. Our property backed up to what felt like endless wilderness, and our childhood was spent exploring trails, building forts, and pretending we were intrepid adventurers. The forest was our playground, a place of wonder and mystery. We never imagined it could also be a place of pure, unadulterated terror. One particularly harsh winter, an ice storm tore through our region. It lasted for days, coating everything in a thick, crystalline sheath, snapping tree branches, and plunging our entire town into darkness for over a week. The power lines were down, the roads impassable. It was a surreal, isolating experience, but for two kids, it felt like an extended, spooky vacation. We huddled by the fireplace, reading by lamplight, and telling ghost stories. When the ice finally melted and the power flickered back on, the landscape was completely transformed. Trees were scarred, limbs lay scattered like giant bones, and the forest floor was a churned-up mess of mud, broken ice, and fallen debris. A few days later, the sun finally broke through. Lily, restless after being cooped up, begged my parents to let us go explore the damaged woods. My mom, relieved to see the kids active again, agreed, but warned us to stay close to the property line and watch out for unstable trees. We ventured out, crunching through the mud and broken branches. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of wet earth and pine needles. The forest, usually so welcoming, felt different, hushed, as if it were holding its breath after the storm. Lily, with her insatiable curiosity, veered off the main path, convinced she'd found a secret clearing. I followed, grumbling about getting our new boots muddy. That's when she saw it. Lying half buried in a pile of fallen leaves and mud, partially obscured by a snapped branch, was a doll. It wasn't a modern doll. It looked old, antique almost. Porcelain face, cracked and grimy, with one glassy eye missing, staring blankly up at the gray sky. Its dress, once white, was now torn and stained with mud and what looked suspiciously like dried blood. Its hair, matted and tangled, looked like dark straw. It was creepy, even to an 11-year-old. "Look!" Lily shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet woods, a strange mix of excitement and awe. She reached for it, her tiny hand already digging into the mud. "Don't touch it, Lily," I yelled, a sudden, inexplicable wave of revulsion washing over me. "It's probably old and dirty. It looks like it's been through something." But Lily, stubborn and oblivious, ignored me. She carefully extracted the doll from its muddy grave. As she pulled it free, a faint, almost imperceptible sound seemed to emanate from it. A low, guttural sigh, like rusty hinges creaking in the wind. Or perhaps it was just the wind, or my imagination. Lily cradled the doll in her arms, brushing away the mud from its face. "She's beautiful," she whispered, her eyes wide, a strange, possessive gleam in them. "We have to take her home. We have to clean her up." I argued, pleading with her, telling her it was disgusting, probably covered in germs. But Lily was adamant. She clutched the doll tight, her small, usually bright face taking on a determined, almost fierce expression I hadn't seen before. I reluctantly gave in, feeling a gnawing sense of unease that I couldn't explain. Bringing the doll home felt like bringing a chill into our warm, safe house. My mom, a practical woman, raised an eyebrow at its state but was too busy with storm cleanup to fuss. She told Lily to wash it thoroughly and keep it in her room. Lily, however, was obsessed. She spent hours cleaning the doll, carefully washing its matted hair, scrubbing the grime from its porcelain face, and even attempting to mend its torn dress. She named it Rose. She spoke to it constantly, carrying it everywhere. This wasn't entirely unusual for Lily. She always had an active imagination. This was different. The changes started subtly. At first, Lily became withdrawn, preferring to play alone with Rose in her room rather than with me or her friends. Her laughter, once bright and carefree, started to take on a strange, brittle quality. Sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, I'd hear her talking to Rose in a low, conspiratorial tone, her words indistinguishable but undeniably unsettling. Then came the incidents. Small things at first. My mom would find Lily's toys broken in unusual ways, or books torn to shreds. Lily would deny everything, her eyes wide and innocent, but a faint, almost imperceptible smirk would play on her lips. One evening, our cat, Jasper, a gentle old tabby, let out a terrified yowl. We found him cowering under the couch, his fur bristling, staring with wide, dilated pupils at Lily's room. He refused to go near her after that. One particularly stormy night, the rain hammering against the windows, I woke to a strange noise coming from Lily's room across the hall. It sounded like scraping, a rhythmic, grating sound, followed by soft, rhythmic thumping. I crept out of bed, my heart thumping against my ribs, and peeked into her room. Lily was sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring at Rose, who was propped up on her pillow. Her body was swaying gently, almost imperceptibly, from side to side. But it was her hands that horrified me. She was scratching at her own forearms, digging her nails in deep enough to draw thin lines of blood, then pressing her hands against the doll's porcelain face, as if offering it something. The rhythmic thumping sound was her head, gently hitting the headboard with each sway. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She froze. The scratching stopped. The swaying ceased. Slowly, she turned her head to look at me. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were now a flat, lifeless black, reflecting the dim light from the hallway like obsidian. A slow, chilling smile spread across her face. Not Lily's smile, but something predatory and ancient. "Go back to sleep, brother," a voice hissed. Not Lily's voice, but a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from deep within her small chest. The words were distorted, drawn out, and filled with an unsettling malice. I screamed, a terrified, childish shriek, and ran back to my room, slamming the door shut. My parents rushed in, woken by my scream. I tried to explain what I saw, what I heard, but they thought I had a nightmare. "She was just sleepwalking, honey," my mom said, trying to reassure me. But I knew that wasn't Lily. The next few weeks were a descent into hell. Lily's behavior grew erratic, violent. She would lash out at my parents with shocking strength, throwing objects, screaming obscenities in that distorted voice. Her skin grew pale, almost translucent, and dark circles appeared under her eyes. She stopped eating, only drinking water. Her eyes would often fixate on the doll, Rose, which was always by her side, its single remaining glassy eye seeming to gleam in the shadows. My parents were distraught. They took her to doctors, psychologists, but no one could explain her sudden, radical shift. They suggested everything from a rare neurological disorder to severe childhood psychosis. But Lily would only grow more agitated during these visits, her body convulsing, her words becoming more aggressive, and that horrible, unchildlike voice making chilling threats. One afternoon, my mom was trying to get Lily to eat. Lily suddenly snapped, throwing the plate of food against the wall, screaming, "She doesn't want it! She wants more!" Her eyes were fixed on my mother with such intense hatred that my mom recoiled in genuine fear. It wasn't the first time my parents had looked truly terrified of their own child. It was during one of these violent outbursts, a dark, stormy night where the rain lashed against the house and the thunder sounded like cannons, that my dad finally broke. He was holding Lily, trying to calm her, when she bit him, drawing blood, and then stared at him with those black, dead eyes, a terrifying, silent laugh playing on her lips. "It's not her," he whispered, his face pale, looking directly at my mom. "Something's wrong. This isn't our daughter." My mom, tears streaming down her face, nodded. That night, after Lily finally fell into an exhausted, unnatural sleep, my parents called an old friend of my grandmother's, a woman named Agnes, who lived in a cabin even deeper in the woods. Agnes was a strange old woman, known locally as a wise woman or a healer, but also whispered about as someone who dabbled in things best left alone. My parents, desperate, had run out of conventional options. Agnes arrived the next morning, a tiny, frail woman with eyes that seemed ancient and all-knowing. She walked into Lily's room, barely glancing at the child, her gaze fixed instead on the doll, Rose, which lay beside Lily. She picked up the doll, her brow furrowing, and ran a gnarled finger over its cracked porcelain face. "This is not a doll," Agnes said, her voice raspy, yet firm. "This is a vessel, and something old, something hungry, resides within it. It has found a new home within your child." My parents gasped, their faces ashen. I just listened, a chill running down my spine. Agnes explained that the storm had likely unearthed the doll from a shallow grave, a place where it had been intentionally buried to contain the malevolent spirit. "These woods," she said, "they hold many old things. Some should never see the light of day." She then explained that the entity was feeding on Lily's life force, twisting her, slowly consuming her, until nothing of our sister would remain. Agnes said she could perform a ritual, but it would be dangerous, and it would require the doll to be destroyed. My parents agreed without hesitation. That evening, as another storm gathered outside, Agnes began her work. She drew strange symbols on the floor of the living room with chalk, lit candles, and burned incense that filled the air with a pungent, earthy smell. She laid the doll in the center of the chalk circle, and then carefully lifted a small, intricately carved wooden box from her bag. As Agnes began to chant in a language I didn't recognize, ancient and guttural, the atmosphere in the room grew heavy, the air grew cold, and the flame of the candles flickered wildly. Even though there was no breeze, the rain outside intensified, turning into a deluge, and the thunder roared as if in response to Agnes's words. Suddenly, Lily appeared at the entrance of the living room, her eyes black and wide. A terrifying, inhuman growl tore from her throat, and she lunged forward, moving with a speed and strength that was impossible for an 8-year-old. My dad grabbed her, holding her back, but she thrashed violently, screaming obscenities in that distorted voice, her small body convulsing. "No! Mine! She is mine!" The entity shrieked through Lily's mouth, its words echoing with pure malice. Agnes, unflustered, continued her chanting, her voice rising in intensity. She opened the wooden box, revealing a small, intricately carved silver dagger. As she lifted the dagger, the doll, Rose, in the circle, began to tremble violently. Its single eye seemed to glow with a malevolent red light. The entity possessing Lily shrieked, a sound that curdled my blood. Lily's body contorted into unnatural positions, her head twisting, her limbs bending at impossible angles. It was agonizing to watch. My mom cried out, begging Agnes to stop, but Agnes shook her head, her face grim. With a final, thunderous crack of lightning that illuminated the entire room, Agnes plunged the silver dagger into the doll's porcelain head. The doll shattered. Not just the porcelain, but its very essence seemed to explode outwards. A black, viscous smoke erupted from the broken pieces, swirling violently within the chalk circle, coalescing for a moment into a shadowy, vaguely humanoid form, with 2 burning red points for eyes, before dissipating into nothingness. At the exact same moment, Lily went limp in my father's arms. The horrifying screams stopped. Her body slumped, exhausted. My mom rushed to Lily, pulling her into a tight embrace. As Lily slowly opened her eyes, they were again the warm hazel I knew, albeit filled with confusion and fear. She looked up at my mom and whispered, "Mommy, what happened? I had a bad dream." Agnes rested for a moment, then explained. The entity was gone, banished, but its presence had left a mark. Lily would be weak for a while, and the experience would stay with her, perhaps forever, though she might not consciously remember the specifics of the possession. We spent the rest of that night huddled together, shaken but relieved. Agnes stayed until morning, ensuring the house felt cleansed before she left, carrying the shattered remains of Rose in a specially prepared, lid-lined box, which she promised to dispose of where, Nothing could ever find it again. Lily recovered physically, but she was never quite the same. She grew up quieter, more introverted. She still had nightmares, sometimes waking with a scream, remembering fragments of that bad dream. She never touched another doll again. And to this day, neither of us can walk through those woods without a shiver down our spine, especially after a heavy rain. We learned that day that some things are buried for a reason, and not every lost thing should be found. Mark was one of my oldest and closest friends. We grew up together in a small, sleepy town in rural Georgia, the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. That is, unless you looked for it. And Mark, with his insatiable curiosity and a mind always buzzing with strange ideas, always looked for it. He was fascinated by the occult, by old legends and local superstitions. While other kids were talking about video games or high school crushes, Mark was engrossed in forgotten histories, stories of witchcraft, folk magic, and particularly tales of crossroads. He swore that the desolate, overgrown crossroads just outside of town, where two ancient dirt roads met beneath a gnarled, lightning-struck oak tree, was special. A place where pacts could be made. A place where, if you knew the right words and were willing to pay the price, you could summon something that would grant your deepest desires. I always dismissed it as youthful fantasy, a harmless eccentricity. "Come on, Mark," I'd say. "You've watched too many horror movies." He'd just smile, a glint in his eye, and say, "You don't understand, man. The old ways are real, and sometimes you gotta break the rules to get what you want." Mark was ambitious, incredibly so, but also incredibly unlucky. He had brilliant ideas for businesses, amazing artistic talent, but every venture he tried ended in failure. He struggled with money, with recognition, with finding his place in the world. He started to grow bitter, frustrated, watching others succeed where he stumbled. The glint in his eye, which I once thought was curiosity, started to look more like desperation. One particularly stormy evening, the kind where the rain lashed down so hard you could barely see, and the thunder rattled the very foundations of your home, Mark called me. His voice was breathless, manic, almost triumphant. "I did it," he whispered, the sound of the storm roaring in the background, making his voice sound impossibly close, yet strangely distant. "I went to the crossroads. I made the offering. I asked for success, for everything." My blood ran cold. "Mark, what are you talking about? What did you do?" "The pact," he said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling chuckle. "It's done. I felt it, Alex. A promise. A connection." I tried to reason with him, to tell him he was delusional, that the storm had probably messed with his head. But he just laughed again, a sound that was starting to feel less like my friend and more like a stranger. In the days that followed, an unsettling transformation began. At first, it seemed Mark's luck had indeed turned. His struggling art career suddenly exploded. A gallery in New York, which had previously rejected him multiple times, not only accepted his work, but offered him a solo exhibition. His business idea, which had been stagnant for years, suddenly found an investor, then another, and then a third. Money flowed in, opportunities opened up. Everything he had ever dreamed of, he was getting. But he was changing. The old Mark, thoughtful and kind, though often frustrated, was slowly fading. He became cold, calculating, ruthless. His successes were not met with joy, but with a strange, quiet satisfaction, a hungry glint in his eyes that seemed to demand more. He rarely slept, often working through the night, fueled by an almost manic energy. He lost weight, his face growing gaunt, his skin pale, but his eyes seemed to glow with an unnerving intensity, a deep, unsettling blackness. He stopped calling me, stopped seeing me. When I did manage to catch him, he was distant, his conversations clipped and devoid of emotion. He'd often refer to his successes as our work or our achievements, even though he was alone. When I asked him about it, he'd just smile, a slow, unsettling curve of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "We have a symbiotic relationship now, Alex," he'd say, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "A partnership. It provides. I provide." I tried to confront him directly one day. "Mark, you're not yourself. What's happening to you? This pact, it's doing something to you." He just stared at me, unblinking. The air in the room grew cold, even though it was a warm summer afternoon. "It's giving me everything I deserved," he said, his voice flat. "Everything I was owed. And the price is acceptable." "What price?" I demanded, a growing terror seizing me. He leaned in close, his breath cold on my ear. "It asked for a small piece of my will, a fragment of my conscience, and eventually, a portion of my time." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "A small investment for boundless returns." I was horrified. He wasn't just talking about a deal. He was talking about a sacrifice of his very self. I tried to convince him to break whatever pact he'd made, to seek help. His eyes narrowed, turning almost completely black. "You don't understand," he hissed, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deeper, resonating with a strange echo. "It is me now, and I am it. We are one, and we are hungry." He pushed me away with surprising force, sending me stumbling. The door slammed shut, and I never saw my friend, Mark, again. Not truly. The entity that possessed him, however, continued to thrive. Mark's fame grew. His wealth became astronomical. But with each success, a new layer of horror was peeled back. His art, once vibrant, became unsettling, dark, depicting scenes of unspeakable suffering and ancient, malevolent entities. His businesses, while wildly successful, engaged in increasingly unethical, borderline illegal practices, crushing competitors with ruthless efficiency. The glint in his eyes grew colder, the smile more fixed, a permanent predatory mask. Rumors began to circulate, whispers of strange occurrences around him. People who crossed him would suffer bizarre accidents. His former associates spoke of him with a mixture of fear and awe, describing his unnatural intuition, his ability to manipulate any situation to his advantage, and the chilling, vacant stare he'd fix upon them. I would occasionally see him on television or in magazines, standing aloof, celebrated, but always with that same unsettling smile. The smile of something that was no longer human. The smile of something that had consumed my friend, was wearing his skin. And each time I could almost hear the rain, the thunder, and the whispers from that crossroads, echoing the price that was paid. I tried for years to find a way to help him, to break the pact. I sought out other wise women, researched more legends, desperately searching for a counter-ritual, a way to reclaim my friend. Each attempt was met with failure, or worse, with a terrifying pushback. Strange accidents would befall me, minor at first, then escalating. A near-fatal car crash during a sudden downpour, a house fire that was miraculously contained. It was a warning, a clear message to stay away. The thing that was Mark had become too powerful, too deeply intertwined with its host. It had consumed him, not just his will, but his very essence. The final time I saw Mark in person was at a charity gala, years later. He was a titan of industry by then, surrounded by admirers, but utterly alone. His body was thinner, almost skeletal, beneath his expensive suit. His face was a mask of cold indifference, yet there was a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his left hand, a sign of some lingering struggle within. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a split second, I saw it. A flicker of the old Mark, a desperate plea for help in his dark, abyssal eyes, quickly extinguished, replaced by that cold, empty stare. Then, a slow, predatory smile spread across his face, not just on his lips, but in his eyes, a deep, unsettling satisfaction. He raised a glass to me, a silent toast to his dominion. And in that moment, I understood the final price, not just his will or his conscience, but his time. His soul was slowly being siphoned, consumed by the entity, a never-ending feast fueled by his success. He was a prisoner in his own body, forced to build an empire for a parasitic entity that would eventually leave him an empty husk. The pact wasn't just for success, it was for a slow, agonizing consumption. I left the gala, walked out into a sudden, unexpected downpour, the thunder rumbling overhead. I stood there, letting the cold rain wash over me, trying to wash away the image of my friend, or what was left of him. I realized then that there was no breaking the pact, not for him. He had chosen his path, and the entity had claimed its prize. Years later, I heard that Mark had died suddenly, quietly, in his sleep. The official cause was cardiac arrest, but I knew better. I knew the entity had finally taken everything it wanted, leaving behind an empty shell. His empire crumbled quickly after his death. His business is falling apart without his unnatural intuition to guide them. His art, once celebrated, was soon forgotten, its darkness too unsettling for the world without its enigmatic creator. I never went back to that crossroads. I couldn't. Every time a storm rolls in and the rain falls hard, I still think of Mark, of the friend I lost to an ancient hunger, to a pact made in desperation. And I hear the echoes of that chilling laughter in the thunder, a reminder that some desires come with a price far greater than anyone can imagine, a price that can consume your very soul.